How does a Boeing 777, one of the most sophisticated commercial aircraft ever built, equipped with multiple redundant communication systems, tracked by military radar installations across Southeast Asia, monitored by satellite networks spanning the entire Indian Ocean, how does a machine like that simply cease to exist? And more importantly, why have the most powerful governments on Earth spent over a decade ensuring that nobody finds out? On the 8th of March 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 41 minutes past midnight, bound for Beijing Capital International Airport. It was a routine red-eye service, the kind of flight that operates every night without incident. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew members, business travelers, families returning home, engineers heading to work in China. The aircraft was a Boeing 777-200ER, registration 9M MRO, powered by two Rolls-Royce Trent 892 engines. It had accumulated over 53,000 flight hours and had undergone its last maintenance check just 13 days earlier. There was nothing wrong with the plane. So at 1:01 in the morning, the aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. At 1:19, as MH370 crossed from Malaysian into Vietnamese airspace, the co-pilot radioed a final unhurried message to Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control. The words were routine. "Good night, Malaysian 370. 2 minutes later, the aircraft's ACARS data transmission system stopped sending. At 1:21, the plane's transponder, the device that broadcasts an aircraft's identity, altitude, and position to civilian radar, went dark. MH370 had become invisible to every air traffic controller on the planet. What happened next would take weeks to piece together, and even now the picture remains incomplete. Malaysian military radar, which tracks all aircraft regardless of transponder status, later revealed that MH370 had made a sharp left turn over the South China Sea, flying back across the Malay Peninsula before heading northwest over the Strait of Malacca. Thai military radar detected what appeared to be the same aircraft. By 2:22 in the morning, the plane vanished from military radar screens over the Andaman Sea. It had been flying for less than 2 hours. It would continue flying for nearly 6 more. The world did not know any of this at the time. In one of the most staggering failures of communication in modern aviation history, Vietnamese air traffic controllers noticed that MH370 never checked in, yet a full 4 hours elapsed before Kuala Lumpur activated its Rescue Coordination Center. Malaysia Airlines issued its first public statement at 7:24 in the morning, announcing the loss of contact. Astonishingly, satellite data would later confirm that MH370 was still airborne at the time of this announcement. Search and rescue teams were dispatched to the South China Sea, hundreds of miles from where the plane had actually gone. Nobody was looking in the right place. Some would later argue that nobody was meant to. In the days that followed, the investigation descended into confusion that bordered on farce. Malaysia initially denied that military radar had tracked the aircraft's westward turn, then reversed this position under pressure. The cargo manifest for the flight was treated as a classified document, a decision that the Malaysian opposition leader at the time described as inexplicable for a commercial flight. Information was released, retracted, and contradicted in a cycle that left the families of the missing furious and the international press bewildered. Then, on the 15th of March, a British satellite company called Inmarsat came forward with data that would redefine the entire search. Inmarsat's satellite network had continued to exchange automated electronic handshakes with MH370's communication system for nearly 7 hours after the plane disappeared from radar. Using a novel analysis of the timing and frequency of these signals, a technique never before applied in an aviation investigation, Inmarsat and the UK's Air Accidents Investigation Branch concluded that MH370 had turned south and flown deep into one of the most remote stretches of the Indian Ocean, eventually running out of fuel somewhere west of Perth, Australia. On the 24th of March, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak stood before the world's cameras and delivered the verdict. Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean. There were no survivors. What followed was the most expensive search in aviation history. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau led an underwater survey spanning over 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, an area larger than England, using sonar, submersibles, and autonomous vehicles. The operation consumed years and hundreds of millions of dollars. It found nothing, not a single piece of the aircraft on the seabed. In 2017, the search was suspended. A second attempt by the private firm Ocean Infinity in 2018 scoured an additional 80,000 square kilometers. Again, nothing. The plane had apparently struck the Indian Ocean with enough force to kill everyone on board, and yet the ocean had swallowed it whole. Debris did eventually surface, but not where anyone expected. On the 29th of July, 2015, nearly 17 months after the disappearance, a local man named Johnny Big discovered a barnacle-encrusted piece of aircraft wing on a beach in Saint-André, on the French island of Réunion, some 4,000 kilometers west of the search zone. This piece, later identified as a flaperon from a Boeing 777, became the first physical confirmation that MH370 had met a violent end. Over the following years, more than 30 additional pieces of debris washed up on the shores of Madagascar, Mozambique, South Africa, Tanzania, and Mauritius. Some were identified by part numbers, others bore the distinctive interior materials used by Malaysia Airlines. The debris should have been the beginning of answers. Instead, it became the beginning of something far stranger. The man who found more pieces of MH370 than any government agency, any military operation, any billion-dollar search effort, was a former lawyer from Seattle named Blaine Gibson. Working alone, self-funded, Gibson traveled to remote islands across the western Indian Ocean, hired local fishermen, combed beaches by hand, and ultimately recovered more than half of all known MH370 debris. His success was, by any measure, extraordinary. It was also, to some observers, deeply suspicious. Gibson had spent years in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union working as a legal consultant, a background that aviation journalist Jeff Wise seized upon to accuse him of planting debris on behalf of the Russian government. Gibson denied the allegation fiercely, but the accusations were the least of his problems. Beginning in December of 2016, Gibson started receiving death threats. Anonymous callers warned associates that he would not leave Madagascar alive. He was followed. His hotel room was broken into. He was photographed by strangers. The threats were sufficiently credible that Gibson went into hiding for several years, conducting his work from undisclosed locations and keeping his movements secret. There are certain elements in Malaysia, mafia types, who seem to be very much against me and against the search, he told reporters. Someone, it seemed, very much did not want the debris to be found. Then, on the 24th of August 2017, the situation turned lethal. Hussein Ali Zahid Raza, the honorary Malaysian consul in Madagascar, was gunned down in broad daylight in the diplomatic quarter of Antananarivo. He was shot while sitting in his car. There was no robbery. Raza had been the official responsible for collecting pieces of suspected MH370 wreckage from Malagasy authorities and couriering them to investigators in Kuala Lumpur. Just 8 days before his assassination, Gibson had handed over 2 new and particularly promising fragments to local police, fragments that Raza was scheduled to retrieve and transport. The timing was, in the words of one member of the independent investigation group, highly suspicious. Gibson himself was blunt. The diplomat was murdered 8 days after I handed those pieces in. I don't know if they are related, but the timing is highly suspicious. The response from the Malaysian and French governments, both of which had ties to Raza, was silence. No public statement of concern, no visible investigation into a possible connection with MH370. The debris Gibson had recovered remained stranded with Malagasy authorities for months, entangled in bureaucratic limbo while the murder investigation crawled forward. Alternative explanations for Raza's death surfaced, possible links to a 2009 kidnapping ring, but these too remained unverified. The fragments simply sat there uncollected, while the man tasked with delivering them lay in a morgue. It was as though the physical evidence of MH370 was cursed. Anyone who touched it, collected it, or attempted to move it closer to investigators faced consequences. And Raza was not the only person connected to the investigation whose fate raised questions. Marc Dugain, the former head of the French regional carrier Proteus Airlines and a well-known author, traveled to the Maldives in late 2014 to investigate claims that residents of the island of Kudahuvadu had seen a low-flying jumbo jet on the morning of March 8th, a white aircraft with red stripes, heading south toward the tiny, British-controlled atoll of Diego Garcia, home to one of the most secretive American military installations in the world. Multiple witnesses described the aircraft in terms that matched the Malaysia Airlines livery. 2 engines, a light grey underside, red and blue markings. Their testimony had been promptly dismissed by Maldivian authorities. Dugain met the mayor of neighbouring Bara Island, who showed him photographs of a strange cylindrical device that had washed ashore 2 weeks after MH370 vanished. Photographs that were confiscated by the Maldivian military before anyone else could examine them. When Dugain published his findings in Paris Match, alleging that MH370 may have been intercepted and shot down near Diego Garcia, he received a visit from what he described as a Western intelligence officer, British he later specified, who quietly advised him to abandon his investigation and let time do its work. The Diego Garcia theory had been circulating since the earliest days of the disappearance, and it is one that the United States has categorically denied. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney personally ruled it out during a briefing in March 2014. And yet the theory persisted, in part because certain elements of the official narrative seemed designed to point investigators in the opposite direction. Consider, the aircraft's transponder and ACARS were deliberately disabled, an act requiring specific knowledge of the cockpit systems. The plane then flew for 7 hours along a path that, depending on which analytical model one applied, could plausibly have taken it northwest toward Diego Garcia, rather than south into the empty ocean. The Inmarsat data, while compelling, relied on an unprecedented analytical technique that had never been peer-reviewed in the context of accident investigation. And the southern Indian Ocean crash site, despite years of searching and hundreds of millions of dollars spent, had yielded precisely 0 wreckage on the ocean floor. Former Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad publicly accused the CIA and Boeing of involvement in a cover-up, writing on his blog that Boeing's patented uninterruptible autopilot technology gave external agencies the capability to remotely commandeer a commercial aircraft. "Someone is hiding something," he wrote. "It is not fair that Malaysia should take the blame." Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who oversaw his country's role in the search, disclosed in 2020 that senior Malaysian government officials had told him very early on that they believed the disappearance was a deliberate act of murder-suicide by the pilot, Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah. If the Malaysian government already believed it knew what had happened, critics asked, why had it allowed a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar search to proceed in the wrong direction? The case against Captain Shah was and remains circumstantial. The FBI recovered data from his home flight simulator, showing that he had practiced a route over the southern Indian Ocean, a finding the Malaysian government initially suppressed before it was leaked in 2016 by the magazine New York. His wife and 3 children had reportedly moved out of the family home the day before the flight. Friends described him as lonely, emotionally volatile, politically angry. He had sent dozens of unanswered messages to young women on social media. And yet Malaysia's own lead investigator, Kok Soo Chon, stated in the official 2018 report that neither Shah nor his co-pilot showed signs of psychological disturbance. The investigation, he said, could not draw definitive conclusions because the main wreckage, including the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, had never been found. Those two black boxes remain somewhere beneath the Indian Ocean, if the official narrative is to be believed. Their batteries expired long ago, but whatever data they contain, the final words spoken in the cockpit, the last inputs made to the flight controls, the precise sequence of events that turned a routine red-eye into the most baffling disappearance in aviation history, all of it still exists, encoded in circuits that were designed to survive catastrophic impact. It is not the data that has been lost, it is the will to retrieve it. Florence de Changi, the Hong Kong-based correspondent for Le Monde who spent 7 years investigating the case, uncovered what she described as a pattern of deliberate obfuscation. In her 2021 book, she revealed that MH370 had been carrying 2.5 tons of poorly documented electronics equipment listed as Motorola walkie-talkies and chargers, cargo that had not undergone standard security screening and had been delivered to the airport under armed escort. 20 employees of the American semiconductor firm Freescale were among the passengers. De Changi identified what she considered an impossible number of contradictions in the official timeline. Radar data that was revised, then revised again. Witness testimony from Vietnamese oil rig workers and Maldivian fishermen that was collected and then buried. A cargo manifest that was classified for weeks. When she pressed Malaysian officials for answers, she found doors closing. When she pressed further, she says she was warned by a British intelligence contact to stop. The search is now set to resume. In late 2024, the Malaysian government approved a new no-find, no-fee mission by Ocean Infinity, covering a refined 15,000 square kilometer zone based on updated drift analysis and satellite modeling. The company's autonomous underwater vehicles are more advanced than anything previously deployed. There is cautious optimism that the wreckage may finally be located. But even if it is found, there are those who believe the answers will arrive incomplete. The cockpit voice recorder retains only the final 2 hours of audio, meaning that even in the best-case scenario, whatever happened during the critical first minutes of the diversion will have been recorded over and lost. The flight data recorder may tell investigators how the plane was flown, but not why. And the physical wreckage, after more than a decade on the ocean floor, will have been corroded, scattered, and colonized by marine life to a degree that may make reconstruction impossible. 239 people boarded that flight. Families kissed each other goodbye at the gate. Children fell asleep in their seats as the aircraft climbed through the tropical night. Somewhere over the South China Sea, in the darkness between two nations and two sets of radar screens, something happened that no government on Earth has been willing or able to explain. The official search has cost over $200 million. It has produced 30-odd fragments of aluminum. It has not produced a single definitive answer. The plane is still out there. The questions are still unanswered, and the people who got closest to the truth were threatened, silenced, or killed. Perhaps someone knows. Perhaps they have always known. And perhaps the deepest ocean in the world is not deep enough to bury what happened on the night of March the 8th, 2014.